Hi, everyone. My name is Eliza Heeks. I'm the Associate Director at the NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business. We run lots of other events just like this one for students, alumni, and others looking to learn more about how to embed sustainability core to business strategy and learn about career paths in social and environmental change. I'm so delighted to have this event happening today. We work quite closely with Nels Leader on the call, MBA alum and CEO of Bread Alone Bakery, and he's been a great advisor to our center and all of the programming we've been doing for the last few years. And this event wouldn't be happening today without him, not only because it was his idea, but also his connections from, as you can see, around the year he graduated. Everyone here is from 2011 or 2012. So excited to have you all here today. And Nels would be leading us through the conversation, and I'll shut up after this, but we'll open it up to Q&A towards the end. So please get your questions ready and speak up. And also a big shout out and thank you to CISA and Lucy and Maddie from that board for helping us put this together, and they'll be moderating Q&A for us later in the event. So with that, thank you again, and Nels, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks Eliza for the generous intro. And thanks Alyssa and the rest of the Stern team for bringing this together. To all the students and alum that are on, we didn't know when we were planning this that we would be competing with the nicest day of the spring. So double thanks for taking an hour away from outside and doing this with us. Just a few introductory comments and then we'll get into the Q&A. I met Ian, Holly, and Ilana just over 10 years ago now. And though we were 4 among over 800 full-time MBA students, I can clearly remember my first time meeting each of them because each left a mark. These 3 share deep intellect, poise, curiosity, and ambition. And today, these 3 share remarkable career stories. Each has bucked the common trajectories out of business school. They've charted careers that are engaging and interesting and that I think each find personally rewarding. Things that so many of us aspire to do coming out of school, but that can be hard to find. And so all that is to say that this is a really talented group that I deeply admire. And I'm so grateful that they're joining us today. And with the conversation, I hope to pull out some insights and stories from the 3. And I think maybe it'll be a warm up for a future How I Built This that one of them is going to be on in the future. So I want to start by giving each about 2 minutes to tell us their Stern story and to highlight how they got started in their food career. And I'm going to go from left to right on my screen, and that brings Ian up first, and then it'll be Holly and Ilana after Ian. So Ian, tell us your Stern story and how you got started in the food business.
All right, Nels. Well, you have to cut me off if I keep rambling on because I could do that forever. Yeah, so I came to Stern, the full-time program, in 2010, having come out of an asset management company in New York City, Alliance Bernstein, just doing kind of like basic analytics and finance stuff. And when I got to Stern, I knew I wanted to kind of explore entrepreneurship, but didn't quite know what direction I wanted to go. I was kind of interested in energy, interested in finance, a few different things. And so explored that. We did an internship with GE's, energy finance group. It was nice, but pretty similar to what I was doing prior. And then I kind of stumbled across this really interesting opportunity through, I think, the Entrepreneurship Club. Matched me and a couple other students up with a little startup food company in New York City, and we did a little consulting project for them. I hit it off with the entrepreneur, the founder, wound up doing just kind of like an independent internship with him throughout the next year. And then I started working with him full time, kind of graduating out of Stern. And so that launched me into this kind of career path of entrepreneurial food. Since then, I've done, I was at that company, and then it was with another company as the head of finance and ops, or actually head of finance, a company called Watermelon Water. And then I moved over eventually to the company I'm at now, which is Farm Ferments. We do fermented, organic sauerkrauts and veggies. That's my story.
And Ian, just to set the stage for the rest of the discussion, give folks like the 30-second summary of Farm Ferments and where you guys are now in your trajectory.
Yeah, sure. So Farm Ferments, we're just under $2 million in revenue a year, which is actually an incredible amount of sauerkraut, although not an incredible amount of money. We have like a 20,000 square foot facility in Hudson, New York, up the river from you all. And, we're poised to grow. We've got a lot of space, and we've got some really cool technology. So, our growth trajectory is pretty nice, 50% a year over the last few years. We're going to, try to continue to do that. Did I cover it, Nels?
Yeah. And Ian, I'm going to add this in because I know it's going to come up later, that Farm Ferment supports not just organic, but regenerative agriculture.
Yeah.
And you've been funded by a number of investors that have dual aims with their investment. They want to get their money back, and they want to see good things happen in the world. So I just want to get that out there for context as we go forward in the discussion.
Cool.
Okay, thank you. And next up, Holly, tell us your Stern story and how you landed this incredible job with Danone.
Sure, thanks, Nels. So hi, everyone. I ended up at Stern after 10 years in consulting. I lived in Chicago. Most of my clients tended to be oil and gas clients. I liked the work. I liked people. The industry was kind of meh, but I was good with how it was going. I just never wanted to be a partner. So I finally was like, hey, it's just taking a little bit too long. I'm ready to go to business school. Got accepted to Stern with the planning to do internal strategy at oil and gas because it was a convincing story that I would hopefully get accepted on because I knew what I was talking about. But really just was going into it pretty open. In the first month or so of the real recruiting process, that's where I learned what the career brand management was. It wasn't something that had been on my radar. I had preconceived notions that any marketing just dealt with making TV commercials, which quite honestly is super fun, but I didn't think could be my entire job. And so I started down the whole recruiting path on brand management. I interned at Kraft Foods in Westchester, which at the time was where Kraft was one, so it wasn't Kraft and Mondelez. And two, they had a pretty strong beverage division in Westchester. Had a great summer internship, really started to value the idea of working in a category where I had my own personal passion. And it's not something that, like I said, I came to business school with, I want to get into food. But I always say that when I was in consulting, my parents couldn't explain my job. They would always say, what do you do? And like, we'd have this same conversation every month of, well, I work for oil clients and I do this. And they'd say, okay. But when I held up, a package of Crystal Light, that changed the game. And so it was a completely different association that whether you like that product or not, you probably have a feeling towards it. And so it gave me this sense of pride of really liking the ability to work in food. So I accepted my summer internship offer for full time, like you're encouraged to do. And in the second year at Stern, found out that they were splitting the business, closing the Westchester office, moving everyone to Chicago. And it wasn't a location I wanted to be at. So that's how I ended up at Danone. I started recruiting again. They weren't necessarily on my original radar. And I'm really thankful for the change of events that happened because I've been at Danone since I graduated from Stern, which was a fairly long time to be with one company. But I got to tell you that it's really nice to be at a company that has the values that Danone does as well as has the products that we play in, which again was something that I wasn't truly valuing before I started there. So I spent 4.5 years in the brand marketing side, working first channeling my inner 8-year-old on the Danimals product line, which was super fun. I worked with Disney. We built playgrounds. We launched healthy yogurt products for kids. And then I worked on Activia, which is the largest global brand for Danone, but is targeting a 38-year-old woman with digestive issues. So very different consumers. Then I went on maternity leave. And at the end of that time, they happened to be starting the venture group for Danone. And it was going to be located in the city versus the suburbs. And an old boss who's actually also a Stern alum said, hey, you've got to interview with the people starting this team because your commute will be significantly shorter. And I think that that'll be a good part for your life. And so I only plan to stick it out for about a year. Venture wasn't a space that I necessarily had ideas to go into initially. And I had a lot of preconceived notions of how difficult it was going to be. And it's difficult in a lot of ways, but in different ones than what I thought. And it's 4.5 years ago. So I think it's a really fun space. I get to work with entrepreneurs, the people that take the risk. I will maybe do the interviewing on how I built this, not be the interviewee one day, but hey, there's place for everybody in this space.
That's great, Holly. And just, context for folks that are joining in today, Danone as a company is one of the poster childs for sustainability done right in a lot of ways. And the seat that Holly fills is one that certainly from a smaller company we look to as a really important, influential seat. So I want to make sure people joining realize that Holly's sort of a big deal.
Thanks. You're very kind.
And another sort of big deal, Ilana, who's leading a company that's in that hockey stick exciting growth phase. Ilana, tell us your Stern story and how you ended up in your current role at Whisps.
Sure. So yeah, I came to Stern after working at an education startup, and I wanted to transition into consulting. So I came to New York, to NYU, and used the time to recruit, got a summer internship at Bain, and then went back there after graduation. I always really, really loved food and thought that it would be really cool to work in a food company. I wasn't super, it didn't feel like a great fit for me to work at a large food company. And so I was trying to figure out, how could I work at a food company that was a little more like, probably like the company that Ian, you found when you were a student, and I just didn't find. I worked at cheese shops on the weekends. Cheese was my sort of food of choice, and I would just sort of do that. I worked at Murray's, I worked at Whole Foods, just on the weekends to be around cheese and learn more about it, but really couldn't figure out how to sort of combine those two passions in a way that felt right for me. And then I was in my third year at Bain, also went on maternity leave, came back, and I was working for a large insurance company. I really loved Bain and liked the people and the work, but just sort of came back and was like, this isn't really what I'm meant to do. It just didn't quite feel like my calling. And around that time, I got a call from somebody I had met at Murray's Cheese, and she said that there was a large Italian cheese company that was recruiting looking for new talent. They were headquartered in New Jersey. So I drove out to New Jersey and met the CEO and owner, and we had, basically like a 2.5-hour meeting, got along really well. And he created a role for me to join the company and start an innovation team and run corporate strategy for the company. It was a relatively large company that I had never heard of. And so I basically said, this is my dream job. And I left Bain and went to work with this cheese company. Built an innovation team, and the first product that we launched was Whisps. And Whisps are pure cheese crisps. The sort of innovation or the thinking behind that was to create a better for you version of a Cheez-It And we launched Whisps initially to just give our cheese sales team something else to sell that was a little bit different. And then the product just sort of took off and grew. And just about 2 years ago, actually, we spun the business off and sold to a private equity firm. And they brought me over as CEO. I brought over 1 or 2 people from the Schumann team. But we have since hired an entire team. We now have 35 people on the team who are headquartered in Lower Manhattan. So that's the story of Whisps.
Great. Thank you, Ilana. We've got such a great mix on the panel with Ian being in the early startup phase, Ilana being a little bit further along in that journey, and then Holly having oversight of both those stages. I want to talk for a few minutes about the industry and get some insights from each of you. Holly, I'm going to start with you. So your mission at Danone Ventures is to create a healthy and sustainable future of food. When you guys are looking at companies, are there particular issues, climate change, nutrition, or food access that you're focused on right now? And when you look out 5 to 10 years, what are the trends that you guys are following most closely?
Yeah. So Danone globally is a large supporter of the B Corp movement. And so a lot of what we believe in overall, has the support of better environmental, better of your society, better product. And when we look for startups, we look for businesses that share a like mindset. So that doesn't mean that it has to hit on every single mark, but either is doing something that's a better for you health-wise, or a better for you environment-wise, or better for you society-wise. And, there's tons of things that we could tackle. And quite often we have entrepreneurs come to us with a wide range of businesses that just unfortunately aren't within our scope. And so today, when we've looked at it, we've focused on a couple of different categories. And one is reduction in food waste. And so we invested in the US in a company called Hungry Harvest, which is rescuing, ugly produce, ugly foods, if you will, and shipping them direct to consumer. And then we've invested in 2 food waste reduction companies out of Europe as well. Then we've also keep a keen eye to alternative packaging and anything that curtails, whether that means no packaging or different packaging solutions or bulk, if you will, for as an example. And so that trend is going to continue to change. And there's so many differences between what consumers see as the right thing to do versus what may or may not be the right thing to do. And so it's really trying to figure out what that intersection point is on what may be the better solution for packaging. We try to keep an eye on carbon, but that's a pretty wide space. And so, how it touches food exactly, that will play into what Danone does. Often there's a lot of solutions that benefit the overall Danone business, but aren't necessarily branded. So at times we act not only as just the investor, but almost the connector to the Danone businesses. And so we've met with startups that have said, hey, we're out raising money, and we've connected them to the different groups, the procurement teams, the supply chain teams, et cetera, in the Danone businesses, because potentially it's a better business relationship than it is for an investment standpoint.
That's great, Holly. Thanks. It's interesting to hear you highlight food waste up front. I know in the fashion industry too, that's a big focus right now, moving away from fast fashion and towards reusing items. So it feels like for folks entering the job market right now, that's a really interesting trend to keep tabs on, food and otherwise.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Holly. Okay, Ian, I'm going to go to you next. So Ferments is mission driven and supported by social capital. I'm using that term pretty loosely. How has your mission and commitment to your values helped your company grow? And also, have there been trade-offs, financial and otherwise, that you feel you must make to support the mission?
Yeah, sure. Good question, Nels. And first, I'll try to describe, our values and what our mission is. And Nels, you touched on this earlier in your comments, but Ferments is dedicated to working with regenerative farming, especially in the kind of the New York and upstate region. About 90% of our produce winds up coming from the state of New York, and a large portion of that comes from farms that are regenerative, all of which are organic. So this dedication to regenerative farming is really important to us. We come out of a biodynamic farm, actually. There's a nonprofit organization in upstate New York called Hawthorne Valley Association, or Hawthorne Valley Farm. And we spun off of them in 2017 as a for-profit entity with these roots in this biodynamic farm, which is a regenerative agricultural practice that's, very old, 100 years old or so. We've continued to embed that value for regenerating our agricultural lands and our food shed in our core, and we do that by supporting regenerative farmers. The other piece of it is we broadly consider ourselves a regenerative business, and that manifests itself in different ways. One of the ways that's true is we operate in an opportunity zone, which is a designation you get from the federal government, but Hudson, New York is designated as an opportunity zone, which basically means that the government supports investment in this community because it sees it as high potential, but largely as one that has kind of like fallen from its, kind of a prior state of economic prosperity. And so we do that with this regenerative business through creating really kind of high quality jobs, well-paying jobs with benefits here in this community, and we really are dedicated to developing the folks that work at our company, to educate them in lots of different ways and give them access to just good jobs and good benefits. So that's one way we do it. We also engage in solar and a bunch of other things that I'm happy to get into. And so what does that mean? In terms of benefit, it's a competitive advantage we see in different ways. One is a story we can tell, right? We can in our marketing and our interactions with retailers and with consumers, we can talk about our business as being one that has a really strong impact both in agricultural and other ways, and so that's a competitive advantage for us. We also think it leads to a better quality product. So our dedication to using this type of produce means, we're using really just delicious, high nutritional density foods, and that shows up in the quality of the product. And so when you taste our product relative to a lot of the folks in our space, it is better. And I say that as the CEO of the company, but it's a objective fact, I think, that our stuff just tastes better. And it really comes from the fact that we're using these practices. And I think as a business, being dedicated to these things, it's love, right? And like that love, food and love are very intertwined. Any chef will tell you that. You can taste the love in the product. Like our people really care about what they're making. They do not want to send bad product out into the world. And again, that shows up in the quality of our product. And then I think last, the benefit is working with investors. Our company tends to attract folks that are dedicated to investing their money in businesses that have impact. Those folks tend to be a little bit more patient with their money. We do not have folks that invest in the company that are looking for a very quick turnaround. When I talk about growth within the context of the company, I think everyone's very excited to see that growth and excited to see us reach, profitability, which we're not quite there yet. But they understand that it takes time to build a company with a really solid foundation, and there's zero push to try to grow quick and sell. So that's a real benefit to us, and it's paying dividends in the background. The difficulties of running a company like this wind up being, you're putting constraints, right? Supply chain constraints on the company immediately. Organic does that, although organic is a pretty, the market for organic produce, et cetera, is pretty robust. When you add on regenerative agriculture, and there's, the definition of regenerative agriculture is developing, but when you add that onto the process, it becomes even more difficult. It means that the spec, the specifications you have around the produce that comes through your door, you have to widen those specs out because, that farmer down the road is growing, their carrots in a very particular way. They may not be the perfect carrot to run through your machine. And so you have to expect to have some additional labor and some additional costs associated with that. Other things wind up being, things are just more expensive. Like our benefit package winds up being above average. That means that, our cost of goods sold are a little bit higher. It means our price is a little bit higher. Selling things at a higher price means that you have to justify that to the market. So you have to put more, kind of gumption behind your marketing effort. But that's all worth the squeeze, as they say. So that's I think that's it, Nels. Anything you'd prompt me to add?
No, that's great, Ian. And as you're giving your answer, I was thinking about the Hawthorne Valley products on the shelves. You've got like, the white of your kraut, and then the bright orange of your carrot, and the bright red of your beet. And what you were saying really rings true. I mean, the quality of that product literally jumps off the shelf. You can see it even before you taste it. Okay, great, Ian. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So next, Ilana, you with Whisps, you have found traction and success in a really difficult category, snacks. I mean, as food professionals, I don't think we walk into the grocery store and say, "Oh man, there's so much open space in the snacking aisle." There's a lot of product variety out there. So looking back, what are the decisions or the insights that you think positioned Whisps for your current growth? And maybe can you share a war story from along the way?
Yes, sure. Yeah, I think it's a really it's a good question. We when we first started Whisps, as I mentioned, the concept was really to create a Cheez-It that didn't have a paragraph of ingredients in on the back, and I really wanted to go after something really delicious. I believe that pure cheese tastes great, and you don't need to have a whole bunch of fillers and chemicals to get a delicious flavor. And so we really focused a lot on the concept of creating Whisps. Since you just grate cheese and bake it, and you have a Wisp at the end. It's really incredibly simple. It seems incredibly simple, and the complexity is sort of like what Ian was talking about, which is like the actual cheese that works well to make a Wisp is very specific, and you need a very special blend of it, and you need to bake it in a certain type of oven for a certain amount of time. There's a whole bunch of work that we did sort of on the R&D side to figure out how to really concentrate the flavor. And I think that was really the thing that I would point to as the unlock for us, was that I was owned at that point by a private company that really wasn't sort of fast turnaround and had patience. And so what we did was we said, hey, we're not launching Whisps until it tastes perfect, until it tastes just like the cheese that we're starting with, just in sort of a cracker crunchy form. We also launched with a sort of better for you snack, which is the fast growing category of snacks. So you're right, snacks is a huge category, but as a whole, it's not growing particularly quickly. It kind of grows with the population, and it's just it's sort of a category that's already fully absorbed into the population, and so you just sort of almost everyone buys some kind of snack, and so there's not a lot of growth there. The category within snacking that's growing really well is better for you snacking. And I think we compete really well in that category for a couple of reasons. We have the clean ingredient statement. We're low carb, we're high protein, we're no sugar. So we have all of these call outs that a lot of better for you snacks have, but we always led with flavor. And so I think a lot of us have gone to the supermarket and been like, oh, I should get this, kale chip or quinoa puff or something that sounds better for me and has all the call outs on the front, and you go and you eat it and it's not that delicious. Whisps, I think we've always led with something, the snack needs to be delicious. And so we have a really good ability to get purchased off the shelf once people see us, but then we also have a really, really high rate, one of the highest in the category, so that people are like, oh, this is good for me and it tastes really good, I would like to buy it again and again. And so I think that is sort of, for us, I would say, the big thing that, Ian was mentioning too, is just like focusing on flavor and the love for the food. If you lead with that, you'll have people that respond really well to it. If you lead with like, I want to make a food that is high in protein, low in carbs, low in sugar, you could definitely make something like that, but it doesn't mean that it's going to taste good. It's a little bit of like the difference between food that was generated by a survey and food that was generated by a chef or a food lover, and I think kind of for us, we erred on the side of, generating food from food perspective, and then we just benefited from all the fact that we're aligned with consumer preferences.
That's great, Ilana. One of the points you highlighted, I want to emphasize, which is, within snacks, which isn't growing overall, there's huge opportunity, and it's something you see in food in general. The food industry is over $1 trillion business domestically. So in all these niches of the business, if you create a better than product or an innovative product like you guys have, you can unlock a lot of opportunity. So Eliza and Alyssa, I want to try to sneak in one round of professional experience and job advice questions, and then why don't we go to Q&A? Does that sound good? So for the panelists, I'm going to ask you to try to keep your answers to a minute or two, so that we have plenty of time for student Q&A. And Ilana, I'll stay with you. So your products now are available all over. I mean, you're in Target, Costco, BJ, ShopRite. I couldn't believe looking up on your website all the success stories you have, and your company's going through a period of rapid growth. How has your background in consulting helped you navigate this period? And also, what are some skills that you really needed to add on to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, consulting is really good because I think consulting gives you confidence to sort of wrap your arms around a problem you don't know anything about in a very short period of time. And you kind of need that as your, in any industry, but particularly as you're building a business, you're like, I don't know anything about trucking, but I need to find a company that is going to truck Whisps across the country. I'm going to learn about that really quickly. And so I think consulting gave me the skill set and the confidence to say, like, I might not be an expert on this, but I still think I can probably make a relatively good decision, or at least find people that can help me make a smart decision. So I think consulting was really valuable in just giving me that confidence and helping me structure problems that feel sort of big and ambiguous. And so much of consulting is just simply doing that. And then, yeah, I don't remember. I'm looking at the rest of the question. Nels, was there a second side of that, or was it?
And then what about skills that you feel like you needed to add on, Ilana, that you didn't gain in your consulting career?
Yeah. And I think there's a really big difference between making a PowerPoint and making a product. And I think when I was in consulting, I remember I want to see my product on a factory floor or in a store, and now I do, and that's super cool. And it also has a whole bunch of real world components and problems that I didn't know much about, or at least only knew about theoretically, which is like, I spend a ridiculous amount of time talking about cardboard boxes in my life, and how to ship product in the right size and shape and thickness of a cardboard box. And it's just like there's a whole bunch of the cheese didn't show up, or the truck broke down, or the packaging was broken, or bags all got crushed. All of those things that are just really sort of tangible, real world problems that were never my problem as a consultant now are. And I think it's cool. It's really challenging and hard because it's not just like, oh, well, theoretically in this situation, here's what you would do. It's like every day there's moments like this where you're like, okay, we don't have enough product, or the truck is broken down. How are we going to solve it? And that's as much as we've grown, those problems, I think one of the things I've definitely experienced is those problems are the ones that bubble up to me, because they require decisions that, it's like, okay, do we invest in this, or do we call the customer to say we can't make it, or do we, there's all those types of difficult decisions, which end up being kind of mundane when you describe them, but are very stressful at the moment. Like, what do we do with this pallet of crushed product? Oh my God, do we like airlift another pallet, or do we just call the customer? And those kinds of decisions are, a big part of my week or my day at Whisps.
I'm so glad you highlighted that, Ilana. I mean, in the food industry, not only do you need the strategic vision, but you need the operational excellence. We work in small margin businesses, so you really have to get comfortable leaning into the details of running your operation well if you want to be successful. And I had the same experience as you. I went through a steep learning curve for that. Okay, I'm going to go to Holly next. So Holly, in the course of your work with Danone, you meet a lot of entrepreneurs and food industry executives. What qualities are you looking for when you're putting money to work in a team? And how can students use resources at Stern to help gain those qualities?
Sure. So a couple of the quick qualities that I look for curiosity, which sounds like it should be a given, but it's really of a person wanting to solve a problem and really being curious of figuring out what the solution might be versus I'm just going out to do this. I look for inventiveness because, like Ilana was saying, there's going to be a different solution or a different problem every day. So someone that's willing to think outside of the box and potentially change the way that they're going is important. And we've seen that be super important over the last year as many companies had to change what their plans were because of the pandemic. And then I also look for, a collaborative nature, which also sounds like a given, but it's super hard to be an entrepreneur. It's super hard to fundraise. And there comes a bit of humility on both sides of that relationship to have the full transparent conversations, because I truly believe that you have a really good relationship, you can solve your problems quicker and get to the root of how can we help you, versus not wanting to necessarily take the help because you want to believe that you can do everything. We can't do everything. Like, doesn't matter what your function, what your role is, you work within a village. And so the more you're willing to lean on that village and ask for help, I believe it's the faster you can get to solutions. And through Stern, it's really building your relationships with your classmates, building relationships with various teachers within the different clubs. I just am a firm believer that you're clearly paying a lot of money, so suck everything you can out of it.
So Holly, your answer was focused on, the EQ almost entirely, right? And
Yeah.
definitely one of the lessons that I took away from Stern that I heard at the time and didn't appreciate till the future was that the soft stuff is the hard stuff, truly, in building a business. And it's a really different mindset than what a lot of us have as we're going through the curriculum and focused on our finance and accounting courses. And most folks that I think we meet that are in positions like you all are challenged by the soft stuff, not the hard skills. So great segue to our final question for Ian. So Ian, you come to the CEO role by way of CFO responsibility. So you are a numbers guy at heart. What have you had to learn and improve to fill out the role as CEO?
That's a great question. What was the biggest challenge? I think, creativity is probably the biggest challenge or the biggest thing to develop as someone that comes from a numbers world, and maybe getting stuck in the numbers and trying to open up your vision a bit is another challenge, and maybe those are kind of two sides of the same coin. And so and maybe a third, and it all kind of comes back to the same thing, is learning how to communicate with folks. And maybe this is the biggest one, especially in an industry that I work in, learning how to communicate with folks that don't have that like core background and that knowledge of finance, I can totally nerd out and like just go and just keep talking about the numbers and the process and the model and the margin and all these other things. And if someone's not communicating back, or at least initially, if people weren't understanding that, it was hard to get past that. And so understanding that not everyone comes from that background, that finance in some ways is just a language, and as a CEO, you have to flex and you have to learn the other languages, right? And so I think that's what I've really tried to do over the past few years, and that's paid off. That's paid off quite a bit. And on the other side of that, I've made a real attempt to teach financial literacy and to make that just part of the development process at the company. And so, everyone in our company, from the person who's like, literally sweeping up the sauerkraut at the end of the day, to the person that's selling the sauerkraut, understands some basics around a P&L, profit loss, understands like some amount of balance sheet concept. And that's something that I continue to push, maybe selfishly because I want to be able to talk about that, but also because I think it really does drive efficiency and it drives understanding. And I think ultimately is a benefit to those folks to be able to take that type of thing away from the job.
Great, Ina. I'm so glad you brought in that point of, developing that skill set so that you're treating everyone like an owner in a business and working together to achieve collective success, which I think we all appreciate is so important. Okay. Holly, Ian, Ilana, thank you. We're going to go to student Q&A now, and I'm going to turn it over to Maddie.
Thanks. Lucy will actually be moderating.
Oh,
I'll turn it over to
apologies. I'm going to turn it over to
No worries.
Lisa.
No worries. Thank you guys so much. This was fascinating and really inspiring. And I will encourage people to put questions in the chat or raise your hand, depending on how you're feeling this afternoon, evening. But we have a couple in the chat already. The first one, and this might be best suited to Holly, is that trends are coming and going so quickly. Consumers are always looking for new, exciting options. I'm curious how the panelists decide which trends are worth investing in, if any, versus how to know when to stay true to your core product offering or thinking longer term. So maybe Holly, from looking at the entrepreneurship side, and then Ilana and Nels, you could probably comment this as well on sort of thinking about new product lines for your own businesses.
Sure. So for us, being a corporate at the core, we tend to look at businesses that are related either directly or tangentially to what Danone works in. So that's fresh dairy, plant-based foods, that's hydration or waters, and then also early life nutrition and medical nutrition. So our marching orders, if you will, are products that are either in those core spots or really kind of solving around the whole spectrum. So instead of just looking at waters, for example, we look at hydration. And so that can include anything from really quick trends to ones that are a little bit more lasting. Our model is we like to develop relationships with entrepreneurs over time versus just investing right away when we meet them. So ideally, you're testing out some of those trends over a little longer time frame. But it's not always the case necessarily. So we try to stay with foods that are not only within our category, but then also within our kind of beliefs. And so for us, that tends not to be anything that's a really early emerging category on foods that are tangible consumables. But if it tends to be more on a food tech side, we'll take a little bit more risk on something that's not necessarily proven out yet.
I'll chime in on this one and say that, I think in a business, it's really important that you always know what's important for your company versus what might be interesting. And there are new products that may make sense for some companies because it's part of their vision and what they want to achieve. For Bread Alone, we're very committed to being operationally excellent with the items that we do and finding more space for those particular items. So we try to keep blinders on when it comes to sort of new flashy things, but there are plenty of businesses where that is the core business, going after the new trends and capitalizing on them.
Great, thank you. Next question is from Andrew, and this looks like some career advice. So Andrew says, I've been a chef for over 20 years in NYC, moved into operations and multi-unit leadership for the past 7 years. While operations made sense as a transitional role, it's not where I want to go with my career, and would like to use my time at Stern to learn about areas like supply chain and sustainable finance. Does it make more sense to seek out a role in operations where I could laterally learn about these things, or take a step back in service of expanding my skill set and experience? So I'll open it up to the floor for any general thoughts on within the food world, the business world, the sustainability world, if it makes more sense to kind of focus on where your core skill set was and dip your toes into those other things, or to try to make a bigger pivot.
Well, let me take it first. I'll say quickly that, the smaller the company, the more the opportunity is to really try a lot of different things. And so it was really one of the reasons why I wanted to get into a small company. Is I really, had my passions were all over the place. And so I really wanted to be able to explore different things and to pivot. And so that's what happened, right? So I was a finance guy, got a job, doing finance and operations, that led into strategy, talking to a bunch of folks, doing lots of different things. And then, now as a leader of a company. So going small in that way is a good idea. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that's a great. I think that's great. I think the small companies can really help. Even I was in a slightly larger company, but in a sort of created a bit of like a small team within that company that I could sort of raise my hand to take on a lot of stuff that everyone else in the company was already fully staffed on things. And I actually, as much as I think it's tempting to try new things, and we all should, I think coming at those new things from a place of strength and confidence can be really, really helpful, and can buy you sort of goodwill and confidence within a new organization. So if you come into an organization like, hey, I just want to learn about this thing, I don't know really much about it at all, you're gonna have to earn the credibility over time. If you come in with like, hey, I know what I'm doing on, let's say 80% of this job, and then I'm gonna raise my hand to take on more and more stuff, but people will call on me and ask me to do more things because I'm demonstrating excellence in most of my job. I think that's helpful, because I think the more you lead with, I don't know what I'm doing, but want to learn, the more people are going to say like, well, he doesn't know what he's doing, so I'm not sure how much I want to give him. Sort of. So I would say like lead from your place of strength, and then try to raise your hand to learn more, or in the extra 10% of your time or 20% of your time you have in
Yeah, and I'll just add on. I completely agree with that, and I think when I look at my career, I look at, you have 2 levers. You have your like function lever, and then you have your industry lever. And so it's hard. You got to really have someone that's going to take that risk on you if you want to change both levers. But if you can go in with one, it gives you that confidence and then almost move laterally where you are. So maybe you use your food background to stay within food, but then go into a new function. But you're coming in with a ton of experience. I'm making this up. Like you'd go to a restaurant group that gives you the ability to learn more of the supply chain, et cetera, but you're coming in because you've worked hardcore in restaurants for 20 years. Or you go within the function that you're in and you switch your industry, but it gives you that confidence footing. It allows you to know the language, whether it's functionally or industry wise, to already start, even though you're going to change up a percentage.
Great, thank you. This next question is probably best for Ilana. from Lauren. What would you suggest as advice or steps to take for someone who's very interested in food and potentially interested in entrepreneurship down the line, but not quite yet? So I know you had that great opportunity to go learn about the Italian cheese company, but were you looking for those kinds of opportunities? Were you waiting for the entrepreneurial calling, or do you think it was just the right thing at the right time?
Yeah, I would say, I would encourage Lauren to, why not yet? I think you should I think we do a lot of disservice to ourselves to make, I'm 2 years away from being ready for this opportunity. I need to do these 3 things first in my career before I am going to be ready to do the thing I really want to do. And there's a whole bunch of people who are less qualified than you for whatever it is that you want to do, who are out there confidently doing it. And people are succeeding. I think there's a little bit of a myth about like all the steps we need to take before we have the job we want. But if there's other reasons that it feels like that's not the right thing for you to do right now, what worked for me was I talked a lot about my interest in food. I made my passion for cheese sort of a weird thing. When I was at Maine, we used to have a United Way auction, and I always auctioned off like a cheese club that I would give to somebody, like a once a month cheese club. And so I was known around the Bay, New York office as the person who loved cheese. So when I left to go work at a cheese company, it all felt very relevant and logical to people. And that is also why I got the call, right? Is I had not volunteered, but I had worked weekends in a cheese shop, and sort of I just put myself out there and talked a lot about it. So I think there is, as Holly was saying before, there's a huge community that you're part of being at Stern, and obviously in any job that you're working in, even if I was not working in a cheese company, but I talked a lot about it. And I think there's sort of a benefit to just being honest. You don't want to torpedo your career and be like, this isn't really what I want to do. But I think talking about your passions, there's going to be somebody who's 6 degrees separated from someone who works in an industry you're passionate about, and they might just remember the fun conversation they had with you about whatever it is that you want to do. And so I'd put yourself out there.
Great, thank you. And I actually have a question, and I'd love to hear Nels' perspective on this, because you've been asking great questions, but we haven't been able to hear as much of your own insights. And I'm curious, and Ian, I think you'll be able to remark on this as well. I wanted to ask about some of the trade-offs that come with the sustainable food industry, organics, regenerative now, where there's definitely more of a recognition of all of the costs involved of sort of producing and selling food the way it should be. So in a way that respects the environment, hopefully restores and regenerates the environment, hopefully pays more of that labor cost, since farm workers, food manufacturers have some of the worst labor conditions in the country. Industrial food for sure, but even a little bit of organic if it's not done the right way. But then at the same time, there's critiques around sustainable and organic food pricing out a lot of consumers where it's not as accessible. So curious how you think about that balance between pricing in more of the environmental and social factors into your business model, but who should kind of bear that cost, and how you think about prices being too expensive, even if they're produced in the right way for the right reasons.
It's a really thoughtful question, Lucy, and I appreciate it. And it's one that we do think a lot about. And I'll give you the answer that we've come to at Bread Alone, and it's by no means the right answer. So we are committed to producing our breads with organic grain and to the different sustainability tenets of our company for both people and planet. So that's a given. That's our starting point in how we operate our business. So how do we make those products affordable to all the folks that want to eat them, not just the most privileged among us? We have to be really good operators. We have to be really disciplined in the decisions that we make. When I said before, do we chase new product trends? No, we don't, because we know we have to be great producers of sliced organic bread to get it out there at a price point that people can broadly afford. So our bread is more expensive than commodity product, and we're not at a place yet with our business where we can price compete at that level. But I do feel that we are making shrewd decisions that allow us to make this product that's built on our values available to as many people as possible. So not a perfect solution, not a perfect answer, but at least at the bakery, that's what we've come to. And we really do try to exercise that discipline to ensure that we're giving ourselves and our customers the opportunity to have these simple, honest products that we want to put into the world.
And I'll just parrot some of that. I mean, you kind of pick your battles, and on our side, you know, we do not put a constraint on our side around like automation. So, you know, we believe in technology. We think that, you know, getting lots of good, high quality crowd into jars very quickly is the way to solve some of these issues. The way that the cost structure works within food, the actual food within the jar or the packaging represents only like a fraction, a pretty small fraction sometimes, of what the ultimate cost of the thing is. And so you may decide, I'm going to put the best thing in the jar, and then I'm going to work on everything else to make sure it's as competitive as possible, and then put pressure on the supply chain, because the supply chain kind of outbound winds up adding a lot of costs as well, distributors, retailers, et cetera. You work with them too, and you say, listen, we have to get this good product out to the customer at a lower price. What can we do?
Great, thank you. And we're running up on time, but have one more question from Raquel, which is the first annual National and Organic Industry Benchmarking Survey showed that industry leadership teams and boards lack diversity. How does bettering this, if at all, play into each of your organizations? Maybe Holly, we could start with you, since Danone is a large multinational company, probably thinks about this quite a bit, and also with the entrepreneurs you're looking at.
Yeah, so there is a real lack of diversity. I mean, when you look at what is the funding rate of female entrepreneurs, what is the funding rate of diverse entrepreneurs, it's pretty sad. But you know, the way to kind of start chipping away at that is taking action. So as Danone Ventures, we had signed I don't even know what the word is, a thing coming out of France with a commitment to have a certain percentage of our investments be in female-led businesses. And that increases over time. We have started to spend more time with different organizations that support diverse entrepreneurship and working as different mentors, doing mock pitches and helping create different opportunities there. I belong to a group of women within the startup space, which a couple of the women out of it actually started an organization called Women on Boards. And it's to really encourage and create more opportunities for women to sit in board seats. So there's a lot of different irons that are in the fire in that space. I'm encouraged by the different focus that it's being taken on it. I mean, B Corp, for example, as part of their assessment, a lot of it has to do around diversity and gender in your own workforce. So there's different ways that we're looking at it. It's nowhere near where it should be, but you know, at least there's progress being to be made, and more people are talking about it, which is the first thing, because it's bringing up recognition, from my opinion.
Great. Well, I think we are at 6:01. So I just want to say thank you so much on behalf of CISA, all of the students and alums here, on behalf of CSB. But maybe Nels, I'll hand it over to you if you have any final words of wisdom, since we really owe this whole evening to you. And thank you so much.
I didn't pre-prepare any grand concluding remarks, and I feel like this was the start of a dialogue. I wish we'd had an hour with each Ian, Holly, and Ilana, respectively. And I encourage the folks that are on to reach out and network with us via LinkedIn. For those folks that are thinking about a career in food, the networking work that you do now can help create the opportunities and create the focus that you need to go after the right job. So take advantage of this really great community. I know I turn to Ian almost daily for support, and Holly and Ilana, even though I don't see you guys often, I really enjoy the opportunities that we do get to get together. So that's all I got. Thanks all.
Thanks
Thanks,
everyone
Nels.
so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.